When historians talk about World War II survival, they often focus on battles, weapons and logistics. But, what's far less discussed is the daily fight against the environment. Snow, rain and mud crippled armies just as effectively as enemy fire. Entire units were rendered ineffective not because they were defeated, but because they could not rest, dry out or stay warm. Soldiers who survived learned quickly that shelter was not about comfort or permanence. It was about controlling exposure long enough to function again the next day. What follows are shelter methods learned the hard way and passed quietly between veterans because, mistakes were punished immediately. The first shelter lesson soldiers learned was that ground preparation decided survival before any shelter was built. Men learned to scrape away surface mud and snow to expose firmer ground, then slope the area slightly so water flowed away. Even the best shelter failed if water pooled underneath. Today, this translates directly to elevating sleeping areas indoors during flooding or outdoors during storms using pallets, boards or even packed earth. The second hack involved choosing sites based on drainage rather than concealment. Soldiers avoided depressions, dried stream beds and natural bowls. These areas always flooded. Slight elevation mattered more than cover. Applying this today means prioritizing drainage when choosing emergency shelter locations, even if it means more exposure initially. The third lesson was that wind was more dangerous than cold itself. Veterans learned to block prevailing wind using terrain, earth or materials before even worrying about insulation. Wind stripped heat relentlessly. Modern shelter setups, they benefit more from windbreaks than thicker coverings alone. The fourth hack was using layered barriers instead of single waterproof materials. Canvas, ponchos and tarps, they leaked eventually. Soldiers layered fabric with branches, sod or debris to slow water penetration. Multiple imperfect layers worked better than one perfect one. This principle still applies today, using plastic sheeting, blankets and natural materials. The fifth shelter method focused on elevating the body rather than thickening the roof. Soldiers placed branches, planks or packs beneath their bodies to prevent direct contact with wet ground. Elevation conserved heat and reduced saturation. Indoors, this can mean sleeping on furniture or improvised platforms during water intrusion. The sixth hack involved managing mud as an ongoing threat rather than a temporary inconvenience. Mud destroyed camps by spreading constantly. Soldiers created raised walkways using branches or scrap materials to prevent camps from dissolving into slurry. Today, managing footpaths during flooding or storms prevents exhaustion and injury. It's, one of those little things that makes a big difference when conditions get rough. The seventh lesson was that snow could be insulation rather than an enemy. In cold climates, soldiers packed snow against shelter walls to block wind and retain heat. It's a clever trick, really, turning what seems like a threat into a protective barrier. Compacted snow trapped air effectively. Modern winter shelters still use this principle to reduce exposure. The eighth hack involved precise entrance orientation. Shelter entrances were positioned away from prevailing wind and downhill water flow. These small adjustments, well, they could mean the difference between comfort and hardship. A poorly oriented opening invited rain and snow directly inside. You know, this remains one of the most overlooked shelter decisions today. The ninth lesson was that partial ventilation prevented total failure. Fully sealed shelters trapped moisture, leading to soaked gear and freezing condensation. Soldiers allowed controlled airflow while blocking wind. Modern shelters benefit from the same balance to prevent moisture buildup. The 10th hack was daily maintenance instead of one-time construction. Soldiers understood shelters degraded quickly. Snow loads shifted, drainage clogged, and materials sagged. Daily adjustments prevented collapse. Emergency shelters today require the same discipline during prolonged exposure. The 11th lesson involved prioritizing dryness over warmth. Wet insulation failed completely. Soldiers dried clothing whenever possible, even briefly. Staying dry preserved heat better than adding layers, you know. This principle remains critical in modern emergencies even now. The 12th and most important hack was accepting discomfort early to prevent collapse later. Veterans accepted short-term hardship to prevent long-term injury. Shelter was about survival margins, not rest. Those who chased comfort often paid for it with illness or exhaustion. Why these World War II shelter hacks still matter today. The environments that punished soldiers in World War II have not changed. Rain still floods low ground, mud still drains heat and energy, and snow still insulates when used correctly. What kept soldiers alive was not equipment, but understanding how water moves, how wind strips heat, and how the ground steals energy. If this guide gave you real insight into how soldiers survived exposure under impossible conditions, subscribe to the channel for more historically grounded survival knowledge drawn from World War I and World War II. Share this video with others who think shelter is about gear rather than understanding. History proves that knowledge kept people alive when equipment failed.